Okay, so this video is just going to give you a couple tips on your creative design. And one of the options with a creative design is to just combine two shapes that we've already been using in class, or two or more shapes. So I've put together two examples of what creative design could be if you're combining two 3D shapes together. So for example, this particular shape is a rectangular prism with a pyramid on top. And then the other shape, I have a cylinder with a hemisphere on. So what you need to do first, the first step is determining the dimensions for your creative shape. A couple things to keep in mind. If you've got a shape on top of another shape, so for example, in this case, whatever the length of the base is and the depth is here, will be the same measurements on your rectangular prism if you don't want there to be like sort of overlap, which you could have. So you could have something like a cylinder. My pen is cutting in and out, so bear with me, with like, say, a smaller cylinder on top. And that's okay too. And then you'd have some extra area, and that's fine. So, but if you want it to be exact, make sure your measurements do line up. So for example, if I were doing this shape here, keep in mind that if I want a pyramid on top, my base and my depth have to be the same. So for my rectangular prism, this face, I'm going to color it in green, this face of my rectangular prism would end up being a square because this and this are going to be the same. So how do you go about figuring out your measurements? So what I would recommend is just figuring out, so for example, your volume needs to be 350. So you might start guessing and say, you might say, I want my rectangular prism piece, this piece, to be 250 or close to 250. And then I want my pyramid piece to be close to 100. So for example, you might say, oh, well, this will be 5 times 5 times 10. Perfect. That's going to be 250. Then for your pyramid, remember pyramid is base, height, depth divided by 3. Remember your base and your depth are both going to be 5. So if you want close to 100, you've got to think about what that number needs to be. So you really need to get the top number to be close to 300 because you're dividing it by 3. So 5 times 5 is 25. To get that to 300, you need 4, 8, 12. So this would be, so your height, and keep in mind your height for your pyramid is, oh, that wanted that to be a different color. Let's see if that will work. There, your height for your pyramid is that. It's the height from the bottom, the base, right to the tip. So these would be measurements that you could then use that would work to give you 350 for a rectangular prism and a pyramid together. So it's a little bit of trial and error. If you were doing this one, same kind of idea. You want to think combined, you want them to be 350. Keep in mind that whatever the radius is for your hemisphere has to be the same for your cylinder if you don't want there to be overlap. So again, you might say, you know what, I want the volume of my bottom piece to be close to 300, and I want the top piece to be close to 50. That may or may not end up working. This one, be careful, at 4 thirds pi r cubed, right? Or 4 pi r cubed divided by 3. But then you also will need to divide by 2. So you need to play around a bit. If you had your calculator out, for example, if you want this to be close to 50, you would actually start by multiplying by 2. And then you've got 4 thirds pi r cubed. Then to solve, you would end up having pi r cubed. You would need to multiply by the reciprocal. So we've got 300 divided by 4 there, which will be, so then pi r cubed will be equal to 75. So you're kind of doing a bit of algebra. You could just guess and check as well, but algebra will make it a little bit faster. So now you're going to do 75 divided by pi. And you're going to end up with r cubed will need to be like 23.87 dot dot dot. And then if you cube root that, remember we did do that in class one time where we did figure out using that. I can't remember now off the top of my head when we were using it, but it was one of the problem solving days that we did. So when I do that, when I cube root it, I end up getting 2.879. So we'll say 2.9 approximately. So again, the cube root, you're looking for that on your calculator. So now I know that my radius is going to be about 2.9. So that's going to be the same. So my cylinder portion will be pi r squared times height. So I'm going to do pi times 2.9 squared. And then my job is to figure out what do you think my height needs to be. And again, I'm aiming for close to 300. So I could do 2.9 squared times pi. And I get 26.42 blah, 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 times whatever height's going to be. And that's going to be equal to about 300. So if I just do 300 divided by that answer, I'm going to get a height of about 11.35, etc. So now the only thing you have to do is play around with the decimals because I've rounded a bit. So if you use a radius of 2.9 and a height, say, of 11.3 or 11.4, you may or may not get 350. So you're going to have to play around. So the idea here is you're combining the two formulas. You're figuring out, I want this piece to be about this. I want this piece to be about this. And you're doing a bit of playing around. You're guessing and checking. You're using algebra. So those are just two examples of how you could find dimensions for your creative shape. These are if you have a creative shape that combines two shapes that we've done in class. If you need help, let me know. It is a little bit challenging. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it is doable, and you all have the ability to be able to do it quite successfully. You just have to be patient with it and keep trying different things.